Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I am here to take a first look at whether or not good things come in small packages. This is the new Samyang AF autofocus 45mm f1.8 lens for Sony full-frame mirrorless. Of course, you can also shoot it on Sony APS-C mirrorless, where you get a focal length that's somewhere between 67 and 68 millimeters. Also useful, obviously. But I'm here today to take a look at the build and the design of this particular little lens. Now, I mean, Samyang has really seemed to have hit their stride in basically the last year and a half when it comes to developing autofocus lenses. For many years, they did purely manual focus lenses. Then they started to do a couple of autofocus lenses that were rough around the edges when it came to the actual performance of the autofocus. And that started to change with the, at least in my experience, with the 35mm f1.4, where they started to fine tune that, started going to the dual linear motor approach, and got much smoother. And then through firmware updates, they eventually got fairly good autofocus performance, along with really solid optical performance. They really kind of hit their peak with the recent Samyang AF 85mm f1.4 for Sony, which I'm actually filming on at the moment. And the autofocus, when I did my 6-way comparison of 85mm lenses, autofocus lenses for Sony, actually in my autofocus test, the Samyang was along the top tier, and it trailed only the 85mm f1.8 Sony lens when it came to the autofocus performance. And so that was after a series of firmware updates to kind of, smooth out some of the hiccups that were there initially. Already there's been at least one firmware revision for this new 45mm f1.8. And so while I've been praising Samyang for their willingness to continue to further develop their products and to roll out these firmware updates, in some cases like the 85mm, it's already had 3 firmware updates. And so on one hand, I do continue to commend them for sticking by their products and continue to improve them. At this stage, however, I do want to just offer one minor criticism, and that is when you're rolling out multiple firmware updates within a month or two of the release of a lens, it seems to me like maybe a little of that final beta testing should be done before the actual release of the lens. And if there are things you can discover after you've rolled it out within a month or so, maybe take a few extra weeks before you release the product and smooth out some of those bugs in advance. Maybe just a word of recommendation. So here we are looking at a 45mm little tiny prime. Now this is not quite the same as the 35 and the 85mm lenses, even the 50mm f1.4. It's a little bit smaller maximum aperture of f1.8. It's obviously much more compact, and so they have opted for size and portability over a larger maximum aperture, and so we'll see if that is the right choice. But I do want to say that I would love to see more lenses like this, and while I don't think that in every situation that small and light is the most important thing, I think that a lot of modern lens makers have overlooked the importance of portability, and a lens like this is incredibly easy to throw in your bag and to bring along, and it may get some shooting in a way that if you had a lens that was much larger, covering the same focal length, you have a different, analysis of whether or not it's worth bringing it along. And so I think that maybe Samyang has struck on something that's really, really important here. They've also done it at a reasonable price. This lens comes to market at $399, so under $400 US. And I think that it's, there's going to be people that, while it's not a 35mm lens, Sony's about to release a 35mm f1.8. The focal lengths are close enough that people are going to wonder, why isn't the Sony price more like this lens? And so that's a question that we'll get to answer when we actually review the 35mm f1.8. Now, I will say that 45mm is not necessarily a common focal length. It's not kind of in the traditional focal length range. However, I will say that I have now used a number of 45mm focal lengths, 40 and 45mm. I'm actually quite fond of the 45mm focal length. It's a little bit wider than 50mm, but not enough to make you stop doing the things you could do with a 50mm lens. But at the same time, that little extra bit of width allows it to be just slightly versatile, more versatile as a walk around or everyday kind of lens. I'm actually a big fan of the 45mm focal length. And so let's jump in to see whether or not you and I should be a big fan of this particular 45mm lens. Let's take a look at the build and the design today. So first of all, in a great new touch for Samyang, we have got a nice little molded case. Hard case, not in the sense that it's a hard material, it's soft touch, but really nice little case to bring the lens along with. Nylon on the inside, a little bit padded on the outside. So obviously provides some protection value, and the whole thing is still compact enough that it's actually useful. You can actually bring it along. The lens itself is incredibly compact and nicely built. It has a little lens hood, which is not going to take up a whole lot of extra room there, obviously, but neither is it going to provide a huge amount of shading. But anyway, it's bayonets into place, and overall the lens is still very compact with that attached. The lens is 2.43 inches in diameter. That's 61.8 millimeters, and it is only 2.21 inches in length, or 56.1 millimeters. So, I mean, we're talking seriously compact and also seriously light. It weighs in at only 5.7 ounces or 162 grams. And so you can definitely add this to your bag or throw it on the camera and not notice the additional weight at all, which makes it an amazingly easy lens to bring along. And so really a strong suit for that. Up front, we've got a 49mm front filter thread. We have 9 rounded aperture blades inside. Everything here obviously is automatic. The aperture is electronically controlled, autofocus. The only thing that you really have here on the barrel is the manual focus ring. This is a focus by wire, like basically all true mirrorless lenses. And so that means you have to be in either MF or DMF modes. There is no switch for that on the barrel, so you have to do that from the camera body. And then when you're in those modes and everything is powered on, making rotations here will cause focus through the focus motor. So two advantages that are there is that when you begin to do the focus, it will automatically magnify the highlighted portion of the image wherever the active focus points are. And then beyond that, you also have a distance scale that shows up on screen, either LCD or in the viewfinder. As far as the focus action, it's not the best damping that I've seen, but it is nicely damped, and the focus action isn't bad. And so manual focus is not an onerous task, and so no real problem there. Unlike, say, the recent 85mm lens, there is no claim of any kind of weather sealing here, and so that's the one thing missing that I wish was there. Unfortunately, it is not. Inside, there are dual linear focus motors. This is Samyang's new, focus system that they've really started to tweak and started to refine and get much better results out of. And so autofocus here is very quiet. It's quite smooth. We'll examine that more in a future episode, but no real concerns there. We've got focus speed, we've got focus smoothness, and we've got focus accuracy. IAF works well. We'll explore that more. The lens can focus down to a minimum focus distance of right under 1.5 feet or 45 centimeters, and it has a fairly pedestrian 0.12 times magnification, kind of on the low end of what a typical 50mm lens will provide. So, more akin to that than a lot of times 35mm, which tend to have better reproduction ratios or magnification. So as you can see, other than this not being weather sealed, it follows a lot of the blueprint of recent lenses. I love the beautiful compact little case. Again, because the whole package is so small, it's useful enough that I'm actually using it, which is something that I rarely do with manufacturers' cases or pouches or socks or whatever they throw in there. A lot of times they're not really all that practical. The compact nature of this case is, however, and so I'm thrilled to have it. And so again, you can put it into your bag without taking up a whole lot extra space and get that extra bit of protection. I love the compact size of this lens. I love bringing it along and having it as an option. And so in our next episode, we'll take a look at the actual image quality and see if it is equally lovable as the nice little build with quiet autofocus. We'll explore all of those things a little bit more in a future episodes actually. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, take a look at the description down below. There's an image gallery, which I've already got a pretty wide variety of images there. Again, I love the focal length and it's easy to bring along. As a result, I end up getting more images just because it's along. And so I think that that may be the same for you as well. So take a look at the images there. There's also buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. You can also follow me there on social media, including now on Instagram or at 500px or Flickr. Take a look at those different spaces. Also, you can sign up for my newsletter or become a patron and get advanced screenings of upcoming content. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.